Hi, this is Mr. Evans. Welcome to an episode of Room 310 Biology, and today's focus is going to be on the digestive system. So I'm actually not recording this in my classroom, I'm recording it in my dining room, and thinking about that good meal we just had a few hours ago. At the end of this unit, by the time you finish doing the guided reading and done the lab activities in class and done some partnered work, I expect you to be able to understand the difference between intracellular and extracellular digestion. You should be able to describe in great detail the structure and function of the human digestive system and what's happening to food as it's moving through your body. And finally, be able to do a lot of comparison. AP is quite a bit about comparing different organisms to one another, and we'll certainly be looking at the difference between the diet an animal primarily follows and what sort of adaptations the digestive system will have in order for the animal to be able to eat that diet. So just by way of a little bit of a background, ancient people seem to believe that there was some sort of internal furnace or internal heat that allowed something to eat and digest food, and it took an Italian in the 1700s, Spallanzani, to kind of refute that idea. Spallanzani did an awful lot of work with animals, especially in regards to reproduction, but he had a pet hawk, kind of a neat pet, and it might sound a little bit gruesome, but he had this kind of a cool idea. He would take a piece of meat and tie a string around it real securely and let the hawk eat the meat, and then after a period of time pull the string back out and see what was left. And he in the 1700s was really the first one to realize there was some sort of chemical digestion going on inside of animals that was breaking down food. So we owe that bit of knowledge to him. And in the 1800s, kind of an unforeseen accident led to some major discoveries here. This man over here's name is Beaumont, and he was an army doctor in Canada. And Beaumont had an interesting patient one day, this gentleman right here, whose name was Alexis St. Martin. And St. Martin had the unfortunate luck of being in a hunting camp when someone shotgun discharged accidentally in the wrong direction. He survived, amazingly enough, being shot in the abdomen, and he was left with a gaping wound that never really completely healed in his abdomen. And we refer to something like that today as a fistula. There are animals that have been fistulated. They have an opening cut into them, and the opening is set up to never really heal. It could be plugged shut, but St. Martin was left with this wound right here, and it allowed Beaumont to peer directly into his stomach and even occasionally take samples out, and we learned a great deal about the digestion of the mechanism, what happens in the stomach from this awful sounding accident here. So the material we really need to focus on, let's start right here. This very simple organism up here is a protist. It happens to be a paramecium. It's covered with cilia all around it. I'm going to draw your attention to this food vacuole right here. When a paramecium is consuming some food, it's going to put food particles into that food vacuole, and that food vacuole will contain some hydrolytic enzymes and allow that to be broken down within it, and it obtains the energy that way. Sponges do much the same sort of thing. They get food particles within them and break them down inside the cell. So we're simply going to refer to sponges and protists as having intracellular digestion. Food molecules are broken down within the cells of the organism. If we get a little bit more advanced, we're going to take a look at this creature here, the Hydra. Looks a lot like an upside-down jellyfish, and indeed that's kind of what it might seem to be related to. These are little stinging tentacles. We have a small mouth here, it stings something with its tentacles, and this Hydra has been lucky enough to get itself a Daphnia, this water flea right here, a little crustacean. A gastrovascular cavity. You might notice that there is a mouth and there's an opening inside the body where it can do some digestion, but there's no way to get rid of waste down here. So anything that's undigested is going to go back out of the mouth, functions for both purposes here. The gastrovascular cavity is taking up a lot of space inside the organism, and I happen to see that there's cells lining it in its entirety, so any digested molecules will be able to be absorbed by diffusion very easily. This is an ideal setup for organisms that are fairly small and thin and can rely on diffusion and do not need a true circulatory system. When we look at more advanced animals with a more complex digestive system, mechanical digestion is going to be the act of chewing, breaking down food into smaller and smaller particles. And the key idea here is to increase surface area. So when food is taken in and chewed, you're increasing the surface area, and by doing that, you're making it easier for the enzymes to do their thing because they'll have more surface area of food molecules with which to attack. Eventually we'll get these real small molecules here that can start to be absorbed by the body. Remember, proteins, complex carbohydrates, lipids, those things are all too big to be absorbed. We need to break things down into their monomers. An amino acid can be absorbed, but a protein is going to have some difficulty. And finally, elimination of any material that cannot be digested and absorbed is going to have to be gotten rid of by the organism. Earthworms, we'll do a little comparison right here real quickly. Of course, they do have a mouth and an intestine, esophagus, pharynx, sort of equivalent to our throat, but a crop is used for some food storage, and then the gizzard is going to contain lots of small stones and things, and it's a very muscular organ that earthworm will use to grind its food up into smaller particles. So here's your mechanical digestion, and then food can continue on through its way being absorbed, and eventually anything left over can be excreted out of the earthworm. Insects also have a very complex digestive system, and they do not have a gizzard, but they have much more complex mouth parts, and most of them can do quite a bit of grinding. But once again, there's incredible diversity in the insect world. So some insects might be more liquid feeders, and they just have a needle-like mouth part, and they drink sap, for instance. But we will see a complex gut allowing for digestion and elimination of waste. Now, birds, as you might expect, the focus with them is on keeping their weight down. So birds are going to have no teeth. They have a beak, but they're not going to have teeth in there. That adds weight. So once again, they're going to need a gizzard full of some stones in order to grind up their food a bit. Gizzard, sorry, over here. And eventually excrete any waste on out of their body, and birds have a very high metabolic rate, so they're certainly going to be eating constantly to maintain their metabolism to allow them to have enough energy to fly. Finally, we'll look at a little schematic of the human digestive system. If the object is in green, food does not pass through it. If it's clear, food does. So our mechanical digestion is going to take place in the mouth with our teeth, but our salivary glands are certainly going to be providing some enzymes. Digestion of carbohydrates begins in your mouth as complex carbs, starch, start to get broken down through your esophagus into your stomach. There's going to be a sphincter at either end of your stomach to allow food to come in and to control food going out. And the only thing that's really going to get digested in your stomach is protein. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in class, but the stomach is where protein digestion takes place primarily. The small intestine is where the bulk of action takes place, however, for all foods. The pancreas is going to secrete digestive enzymes. The liver is going to make a chemical called bile. Bile is temporarily stored in the gallbladder, And bile is responsible for helping us to digest fat. What bile does is to break lipids down into smaller and smaller droplets. Remember, they are hydrophobic and are not going to mix well with all the liquid that's in your digestive tract. So the bile actually breaks it into small droplets that enzymes can then attack. The large intestine is primarily responsible for reabsorbing water, because digestion is a very watery process, and then any leftover waste can be expelled. But small intestine does most of the digestion and most of the absorption, and that's an area we're going to be focusing on in class quite a bit. Another sort of schematic of this whole digestive system. Salivary glands up here, you've got one under your ear, under your tongue, esophagus, your large liver, gallbladder underneath. Your stomach has a little bit of a J shape to it. Pancreas kind of tucked in underneath there just a little bit. And small intestine is narrow in diameter but very, 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 very long. Your large intestine has an ascending, transverse, and then descending portion. We'll be looking at these sphincters a little bit in more detail in class and how they regulate food getting in and out. By way of talking about adaptations, I'd like to focus up here. We've got a carnivore, and you might notice it has very large biting teeth, these canine sorts of teeth, good for tearing flesh or taking down prey. I might expect to see something like this in a wolf. Here we have an herbivore. We've got some large flat molars for grinding grass, but we don't really need those sharp teeth for taking down prey. And then humans, of course, are omnivores. Here's one of our molars, but we have a variety of teeth because we eat a variety of different foods. I mean, if you look in the mirror at your own shiny pearly whites, you've got your incisors, your canines, and your molars because you're eating a variety of different foods and have a need for a variety of different teeth. One more comparison that I'd like to make here today and to wrap things up is to compare a carnivore with an herbivore. And if you look at the difference in the lengths and portions of the digestive system, what might jump out at you is this area right here is greatly extended in the herbivore, and that's a cecum. You'll see a couple different spellings of this. But if you are an herbivore and your diet is primarily plant matter, you need a fermentation vat. You need a place to have bacteria to break that down for you. And no organism does that quite as well as a cow. Cows have a multi-chambered stomach. There are actually 4 chambers. One of these chambers is very, very, very full of beneficial bacteria and microorganisms that break down cellulose that the cow can make use of for its energy. Truly kind of amazing that they turn sort of grass into milk. So let's do a little wrap up here. You should now have a little bit of a handle on intracellular digestion. You should be familiar with some of the basic parts of the human digestive system and what's happening in each one. And I'd expect that we have a little bit more idea of what we might be talking about with adaptations of digestive systems. So keep reading in class, keep asking good questions, and we'll see you next time in Room 310 Biology.